do you believe that Chinese media influence compared to the other Western media influence in Africa, are there any difference that we should be looking into? Are they the same? Because some would say, come on, look at CNN, look at BBC, look at VOA. They also have their own subtle way of sharing their own narrative, their own way of perceiving things. They are public media. No, none of them, or not all of them are public media, but even though they're not public media, so they can be private, but those private media are obeying to powerful private interests that also want to share a certain kind of narrative in Africa. At the end, it's just a battle for narrative. Each of them, being Chinese or Western, they use the tool they have in their hands to shape the minds and the hearts of Africans toward any kind of topic, being Western or Chinese. At the end, China just does what he has it in hand, and the West is also responding with what he had at the end. But at the end, Africa needs to also, to, as you say, to develop its own strong, powerful, independent, truthful, factual media that's being able to say, when something comes from the CNN, it can be true, it can also be wrong. When it comes from CGTN, it can be true, it can be wrong. But from African, we can really tell you what really has happened in the ground. So, any differences, or do you think that at the end one has much more positive influence on the other?
Well, I think Western media, BBC, CNNs of this world, the RFE of this world, all these other media entities. I mean, these are sort of like household brands in Africa. These are household names. These are brands that are known. In fact, the retrenchment of BBC from Africa was very, very unpopular with listeners. You had this Network Africa in the morning.
Yeah.
And then you had Focus on Africa in the evening. Everybody listened to Network Africa. I mean, as a student, this is what I consumed.
In Francophone Africa, it was RFE every morning, every 6 a.m. until 7, 9 a.m. It was like RFE.
Yes. So they're better known. They also have very good journalists, African journalists that were there. There were some African journalists, the names will come in a minute, but which were household, right? For Voice of America, people like Shaka Sali was just known. These were African voices, right? African names that were known. So to that extent, I think that there's no question that Western media entities are much more embedded in the African milieu, in the African psyche. I think some of that has to do with language. Some of that has to do with culture. Some of that has to, because the culture, the distance between
the language as well,
and even it's really important. And I think there were certain narratives that were obviously. If we look at the Cold War, and if we look at now, in the context of a strategic competition that is taking place between China and Western countries, that might also be seeping into the media space. But I still contend that on the Western side, you don't really have this,
control,
the strategy of the message, and it tends to have an effect on its own. And some of those effects are not even planned for.
Exactly.
Right. On the Chinese side, the effects are.
It's much more controlled. It's much more
controlled. They're planned for and so on. So I think this would be where the difference is, and we would have to wait and see, maybe 5-10 years, to see how effective both the traditional Western media, as it has been known in Africa, and the new Chinese media, and to see which direction they would go. But I think that in terms of popularity, I still think the elite, the regimes, the governments, because you see, the Chinese media also give them a lot of airtime. They report favorably on them. They report on their projects, on their pet projects. Exactly. They don't have to pay for it.
Yeah,
You see, so the BBC is not going to do that.
exactly. But CGTN will be doing that. They would tell you
Yes,
this is positive
yes,
journalism toward Africa. When
yes,
I was talking to a Chinese journalist, he was telling me, we don't talk about all those issues about the bad things that happen in Africa because we believe that the Western media are doing already a good job enough to portray Africa being bad. So us, we are here to highlight things that work. We're gonna be highlighting, roads that are being constructed, a
yes,
speed train being built, and everything. We're gonna leave
yes.
the Western media talking about John coup d'état, instability, corruption, and everything. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. They choose the angle. Some would say you are covering corruption and all bad governance.
Yes.
Some would say no, they're really doing positive journalism.
Yes, that's where. So in other words, they're saying that there's complementarity.
Exactly.
This is
Exactly.
very interesting.
Exactly.